Tomorrow marks 1 week until Election Day. It's an odd year, so there wasn't supposed to be a state-level race in the North Country. But Assemblyman Billy Jones stepped down earlier this fall to take another job, and so the race is on to fill his seat. We look at the two candidates for the fightin' 115th Assembly District on today's Story of the Day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from the Wild Center in Tupper Lake, dedicated to strengthening visitors' connections to the natural world. More at wildcenter.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Monday, October 27th. Big shout out and thanks to the great Kara Chapman for filling in while I was away for a couple weeks. First up, the federal government has been shut down for nearly a month now, and it could lead to a lapse in food stamp benefits for nearly 3 million people in New York State. Governor Kathy Hochul says the next round of food stamp benefits won't go out as scheduled on Saturday if the shutdown continues.
This is real. This is real pain. This is not talking about something down the road that is literally the month of November.
Hochul says she's trying to get creative to soften the blow. She's exploring whether the state can pave the way for schools to give kids extra meals to take home. Hochul says expanding the existing school meal program would require some legal maneuvering. She says she'll have more to say on that in the coming days. New York Democrats could get another shot at drawing congressional maps. Jimmy Vielkind with the New York Public News Network reports a new lawsuit could open the door.
A Democratic law firm is suing to overturn the state's congressional maps, claiming they marginalize non-white voters. If the case succeeds, Democratic lawmakers could draw new lines that might help win more seats. It's part of a national battle. Republicans in red states like Texas have redrawn congressional maps to help the GOP pick up seats in 2026. California and other Democratic-led states are doing the same. State Senator Mike Gianaris is a Democrat from Queens. He supports drawing new lines.
We obviously have to get engaged and not sit on the sidelines while red states are bastardizing the makeup of Congress.
Republicans say the suit is frivolous. The current lines were largely drawn by a court-appointed expert. In Albany, I'm Jimmy Vielkind for the New York Public News Network.
The moose that was euthanized near a trail in Tupper Lake last summer had a chronic disease and lesions on its brain. That's according to a report published last week by the DEC and Cornell University. The Adirondack Explorer reviewed the report, which found that the chronic condition impacted the moose's ability to navigate through the woods. The moose was first seen on the trail up Goodman Mountain in May and remained in the area. The DEC closed the trail in June and monitored the large animal for weeks before determining that the moose should be euthanized. Over the last few decades, state biologists have performed nearly 200 necropsies on moose in the Adirondacks. About 10% died due to parasites. Two candidates are vying to be the North Country's newest Assembly member. Republican Brent Davison and Democrat Michael Cashman want to replace Billy Jones, a Democrat who resigned in September to take a job at Clinton Community College. That set off a special election to determine who will represent the district that covers all of Clinton and Franklin counties and 5 towns in Essex County. Cashman and Davison recently faced off in a debate hosted by Mountain Lake PBS. Kara Chapman has more on where they stand on the issues and the case they made to voters.
Democrat Michael Cashman is currently in his 3rd term as Plattsburgh Town Supervisor. He says he grew up in a working-class family in Massachusetts and came to the North Country via SUNY Plattsburgh. During the Mountain Lake PBS debate, Cashman said he's prioritized listening to and learning from voters during his campaign.
It's about affordability that works for you. It's about safety, and it's about planning for our future.
Republican Brent Davison recently retired as Troop B commander of the New York State Police. He touted his North Country roots, military service, and law enforcement background.
I'm here today because I feel that the North Country needs a strong voice in Albany. I've been a public servant my entire life, and I'd like to continue that service down in Albany to make sure that the North Country is heard.
Though they come from different sides of the aisle, Davison and Cashman agreed on some big issues. For example, they both want to see carve-outs for the North Country from school bus electrification and home energy mandates. They also both said they'd work to improve safety for staff and inmates alike in the state's prisons. Earlier this year, thousands of corrections officers participated in an illegal strike. They cited safety issues and demanded a repeal of the HALT Act, which limits the use of solitary confinement. 2,000 of the striking COs were fired, exacerbating an existing staffing crisis. National Guard members have remained assigned to the state's prisons for months to fill in the gaps. Cashman and Davison said they'd invite fellow state legislators to North Country prisons to educate them on the impacts of the state's policies. Davison pushed Cashman on the issue, given he's been endorsed and is running as the candidate for the Working Families Party.
This is a party who wants to close prisons. They're for the HALT Act. They're defund the police. As a law enforcement representative, my goal is to repeal the HALT Act and the cashless bail. And I question my opponent if he had a chance today to repeal both of those, if he would do that.
Cashman said he would vote to repeal both the HALT Act and cashless bail. Those bills were big reforms pushed by most Democratic state lawmakers. Cashman said he wouldn't hesitate to push back on his party and those who've endorsed him. That includes the Working Families Party.
There are things that I agree with. Protecting our seniors, making healthcare affordable, working, on an agenda for childcare that could be universal. Those types of things. So while I may have a shared value system in one regard, there are things that I'm very different with.
The two candidates disagreed on a controversial bill currently on Governor Kathy Hochul's desk. It would legalize physician-assisted death, known as medical aid in dying, for those with 6 months or less to live. If the governor doesn't sign it, it could wind up before the Assembly again next year. Davison, who's a Catholic deacon, said he'd vote against it.
That's a slippery slope. Once we start assisting people in dying, we end up having insurance companies deciding whether or not you're costing too much money, and they're encouraging you to go through the assisted suicide.
Cashman said he'd support medical aid in dying. He said he wished his stepfather had had the option available to him while he was dying of brain cancer.
Now, it's not to say that he would have taken that option, but people should have that option. We afford more decency to our dogs and our cats and our pets than we do as humans. If we're going to be a pro-choice state, that has to be a choice for the individual.
Democrats are the majority party in both the state Senate and the Assembly. For the last several years, former Assemblyman Billy Jones was the only Democrat representing the North Country in Albany. He said that allowed him to secure funding opportunities and advocate for both his district and surrounding ones represented by Republicans. Cashman said being in the majority will better position him to push back on policies that don't work for the North Country.
My opponent keeps talking about the majority Democrats. Well, the majority is still going to be there. The big difference is having somebody in the room trying to convince them versus somebody knocking on the door on the outside. I'll be in there with that caucus having those tough conversations.
Davison argued that Cashman is just one person and likely would align with Democrats most of the time. He said Democrats' one-party rule in Albany is to blame for policy problems, outmigration, and high taxes.
The difference for me is I'm not in the majority party, and I don't answer to anybody above me in Albany. I answer to the voters. I'm taking this job out of service and dedication to the people in the North Country, so that is where I'm looking to go.
There are about 1,300 more registered Democrats than Republicans in the 115th Assembly District, but independent voters make up almost 30% of the electorate. They could play a big role in the outcome of the race. Kara Chapman, North Country Public Radio.
You can watch the full debate and check out more coverage on the Assembly race on our website, ncpr.org. The special election coincides with the general election, which is next Tuesday on November 4th. Music today by Christopher Watts of Canton and Paul Myers of Colton. I'm David Sommerstein, North Country Public Radio.